by using MVVM architecture. So we learned both techniques of data binding. So we learned one-way binding and we learned two-way binding. In two-way binding, we learned how to deal with MVC framework and MVVM framework. How to use them, we have learned. Next, in MVC framework, the majority of work is managed by controller, and in MVVM, the majority work is managed by view model. Both are used for different situations depending on the requirement. MVVM is good suitable for the components which want to handle all interactions in the UI level, but it will be heavy. It will take more time for rendering because of different issues, right? Because everything in UI makes UI complex, right? Separation concerns and all will be there. So after understanding how we can manage data binding, so the basics we have learned. That means how we can get the data and how we can present the data, how we can identify the changes and update the changes, right? Now in Angular, so we need to understand directives of Angular. So Angular directives. Technically, what is a directive and what is the role of directive? In technical terms, directive is a function actually. Directive is a function. And the main intention of this directive function is Angular directive function. It is responsible for converting static DOM element into dynamic DOM element. So it is responsible for converting the static DOM element into dynamic DOM element. So actually, directive makes HTML more declarative. Actually, suppose you have seen directives have different work actually. I will tell you. So for example, you have seen NG model. NG model is a directive. Now, what happened is we are using a text box. Input type is equal to text box. So this text box is just static text box. Now, just by using NG model, it becomes dynamic. That means now a memory is allocated for this text box. Its value is stored in the memory, which is allowed to access. So NG model is a directive. So like that, so many are there, we will discuss now. NG model is one directive. The intention of directive is, so directive have a lot of works. Directive can do different tasks. Directive can perform different tasks. Directives have different types of functionality. The main aim is converting the static DOM into dynamic. Directives can do different types of functionalities. Actually, a directive can be used as element. You can use as an element. A directive can be used as an attribute. A directive can be used as a class. A directive can be used as a comment. Directive can be used in several ways actually. Remember, all directives are not similar. In Angular, we have different directives with different behaviors. Some directives are used as element. Some directives used as attribute. Some directives used as class. Some directives are used as comments. Technically, some directives are used as elements. Actually, directives are used as elements to return markup. That means some directives are designed in such a way that when you use that directive, it returns some markup. When you use that directive, it returns some markup, presentation. That means, so we write the directives like this. For example, ng form, that is a directive. So this ng form directive returns a form. Similarly, we have a directive router outlet. What are those? You will learn later, don't worry. So router outlet. Here, directive is being used as an element. We are using as an element. So for example, we have like app login. It is a custom directive. That means it is used for rendering some login page. So remember, here directives are used as elements. Some directives are used as elements. The intention of using the directives as elements is to return markup. They return some markup. But some directives are used as attributes. Some directives are used as attributes to extend markup. That means, for example, we used input type is equal to text and ng model. Here, ng model is also a directive, but it is not used as an element. We are using as an attribute. That means directives have different behaviors. Some directives are used as elements. Some directives are used as attributes. The intention of using attributes is to extend markup. That means already there is a markup. In that markup, you are using this directive and making and extending its functionality. Directives are usually used as attributes to extend the markup. Some directives are used as classes also. You will learn all of them different. Directives are used as classes to make markup more interactive. So directives are used as classes also. For example, you have interactive and responsive. Actually, suppose we have style. In that, directive can be used as a class like ng valid. It can be used as a class. So these are used to verify whether they are valid or not and apply some effects. So these are classes. Some directives are used as attributes. Some directives are used as CSS classes. Some directives are used as elements. So a directive have different behavior according to the situation. And all directives don't have same behavior. It depends on the directive type. Some directives are used as elements. Some directives are used as classes. Some directives are used as attributes. That means generally. So that means directives have different behaviors. Even directives are used as comments also. Comments used as comments. The main advantage of why directives used as comments is nothing but directives are used as comments to target legacy browsers. That means old version browsers, because sometimes some functionalities will not work on old version browsers. Then we write as comments also. Comments means, for example, so we have HTML comment. In that we defined, so we define directive like ng model, and it is referring to name. That is how we use actually. That means there are so many ways. So directives play the key role in converting the static DOM element into dynamic. Directives are responsible for making your HTML dynamic. The interactions are all managed by these directives. But directives will not have same type of behavior actually. So they have different behaviors for different situations. So a directive is designed for different purpose actually. Some directives are used as elements, some directives used as attributes, some directives are used as classes, some directives are used as comments. But all Angular directives are actually Angular directives. Directives are classified into three groups. All the Angular directives are classified into three groups. So we have three groups. We have component directives. So we have structural directives. We have attribute directives. These are the three categories of directives available in Angular: component directives, structural directives, attribute directives. And component directives already we learned actually. Component directive is nothing but technically, so it is the commonly used directive which returns a presentation and provides a functionality. Already we designed components now. Suppose we designed a register component, we designed a login component. So component directives are common. Component directives already we learned. A component directive comprises of UI, logic, and CSS. UI is designed in HTML, so logic is defined in TypeScript, and CSS styles are defined in CSS. and we design the components. We can create our own components, and we can use these components. You can use these components in your application. Generally, you created a component, some app login. We can access this component app login in index page, and we can use it. These components directives are custom. We can create our own component directives and we can use them. Already we are using them. That means app login is a component directive. It is a custom component directive. We created our own directive. So that means if anybody asks like, do you know how to create a custom directive? Component is a custom directive. We are creating our own directive and we are using in any page. And very important is Angular provides several predefined component directives. Angular also provides predefined components, component directives, which you can use in your project. Generally, we call those directives as Angular material. This I will show you in the next sessions. We will see how to use Angular material, how we can work with this Angular material. So Angular material is nothing but it is a library of ready-made component directives. We can create our own component directives. We can use some ready-made component directives provided by Angular. So which is called as Angular materials. So which you are going to see in the next level. Currently, we created our own component directives. And we are using those component directives. So that is the basic thing. So already component directives we know. Only the extra you will learn is how to use the built-in components. Built-in components means the components provided by Angular. We can create our own components. We can use existing components. But to use existing components, you need to learn some more basics, which we will do now. After that, we can use those ready-made components. So component directives, already we know how to create, how to use them. So we created all these, you can see. So this is our component directive, and this is a MVVM demo directive. And we can access that directive and use it. Here, directive is used as an element. So that means when you use an element, it returns some markup. And it allows interaction. So users can interact and it responds. So directives are used in different ways. Usually, component directives are used as elements actually. So we created our own component directives. We know them. Structural directives are important. Structural directives so are nothing but structural directives are responsible for changing the DOM structure dynamically. Changing the DOM structure dynamically means like adding a new element into DOM, like remove element from the DOM, right? Adding a new element into DOM, removing the element to DOM. So modifying the data of element. All such activities are done by structural directives. Structural directives are responsible for adding a new element into DOM, removing the element from the DOM, modifying the data of the element. All such interactions are done by using structural directives. Actually, in JavaScript and jQuery, we do this with the help of functions actually. Suppose if I want to, generally in JavaScript and jQuery, in JavaScript and jQuery, suppose if I want to create an element and add an element into the DOM, then you know that we have to do that where, so table is equal to document dot create element. So table, and we need to add this into some div. So div dot append child, you know all this. So we have to create and add the elements dynamically. So that means JavaScript and jQuery uses lot of references, lot of functions for manipulating the DOM. If you know Java, jQuery, so we have functions like append. So we have functions like above. So we have function like before. We have function like after, which is used for adding the contents, before adding the contents, after. We have options like remove, we can remove an element, add an element. All such things are done by a lot of functions. But in Angular, these functions requires a lot of references, IDs, class names, references, very complex. Now Angular structural directives can provide an easy way for handling them. So Angular structural directives can manipulate your DOM without using much functions. So without using functions and references, they can simply handle the DOM manipulations dynamically. Structural directives. And Angular structural directives are, we have ngIf, we have ngSwitch, we have ngFor. These are the structural directives. The basic structural directives are used for manipulating the DOM. And Angular structural directives, we have ngIf, ngSwitch, ngFor. And very important, structural directives are added to HTML DOM elements to make the static element into dynamic and to extend its functionality. And important point is the structural directives are used as attributes for HTML elements. They are used as attributes for HTML elements. So that means you can bind structural directive to any HTML element, to any HTML element. So by using asterisk, structural directives are binded to HTML elements by using asterisk. That means technically, so we define, so for example div, into that we need to add a structural directive, then asterisk ngIf, like this. Similarly, we have a div asterisk ngFor, like this. So how they are used, what is their functionality, we will discuss. That means we add the structural directives as attributes, and the structural directives are defined with asterisk. But one restriction is there, one important rule is there. Every HTML DOM element can be defined with only one structural directive. This is a very important rule. That means in a div, I am using ngFor, and here I cannot use ngIf, both structural directives in one element. This is invalid. So that means when you are using structural directives, you need to know that the structural directives can be configured only one per an element. So multiple structural directives cannot be defined for an element. So this is very important rule. So it cannot work. We have to use multi-level actually. That means, so we have to write like this. So we have a div. So ng for, and in this we add another div. Here we can use ng if like this. So, and the inner div closed and the outer div closed. This is okay. So you cannot use the structural directives. You cannot use the structural directives directly. Multiple structural directives for any one element. That is the basic rule, right? Some more options you will learn how to handle that. We will see how to use these structural directives: ng if, ng switch, and ng for. So first, ng if is a structural directive. ng if is a structural directive. Its purpose is simple. It can add or remove. It can add or remove any element from DOM hierarchy. Any element from the DOM hierarchy dynamically. Actually, it uses ng if uses a boolean condition, boolean value. It uses a boolean value or condition to add or remove element. Dynamically, in order to add element and remove element, to add or remove element in JavaScript and jQuery, a lot of references we have to write, as I already showed you above. So, but ng if can easily manage. That is the reason already I told you, if you remembered. So I told you that why our technology is called Angular. Why its name is Angular? Its name is Angular because, so in Angular means directives, tags we are using. Suppose this is a div. Now I want to add this div. I want to remove this div. Then usually we have to write a lot of references. But Angular means inside this Angular, it can use a simple functionality here. It can use a simple functionality here. So which can make it dynamically work. Without writing references and functions, we can manage the functionality within this Angular itself, within this Angular. That is the reason this technology is named as Angular. The main intention of giving the name as Angular is that it manages everything inside this Angular only. So you don't need external references regularly. It manages everything inside this Angular. So that is the advantage, and that is why it is named as Angular. We will see how we can manage and how we can work with this ng if. ng if technically it is used for adding or removing the element from DOM. There are several forms we will see. We will see a simple ng if, how to use them. Simple ng if. Then we have multiple conditions, multi-level conditions. If can be used in several ways. We will see that. Simple ng if is nothing but it uses a Boolean value. It uses a Boolean value, and it uses a Boolean value, and it can add element into DOM when set to true. It can add an element into DOM when set to true, and it can remove element from DOM when set to false. ng if is a structural directive which is going to add or remove elements dynamically from the DOM depending on the situation. I will show you how it manages and how it works, how it manages and uses them. Technically, see, so let's create one example here now. Let's create a component. I am adding a component. So ng generate component if demo and skip test. Okay, initially. Okay, and I am generating a component. In this component, we will add some options here. So I will maintain some, component is ready here. Let's go to assets. In our project, we have assets folder. Open assets in the Explorer, and in assets folder, we will keep some images. All images and non-dynamic files you have to keep in this assets folder. So I have some images in my computer. Copy some images here. Yeah, images. And I am adding those images into this location. Some earpod, JBL speaker, jeans. These images we will use regularly. So I will copy these images here. Okay. Yeah, I'm copying these images and yeah, copying these images and keeping here. And when you are using the assets in your projects, so capitalization and extensions, you need to be very accurate. If you miss the capitalization also, Angular is unable to access your images and all. So especially, so capitalization extensions, you need to be very perfect. Okay. Now I will keep this in the startup. That means our component if demo. So let's keep if demo in the startup. That means app if demo in the startup. If demo in the startup. Okay, in app module, I will keep if demo in the startup. Okay, let's run this. Yeah. And projects is equal to Amazon. Okay. So let's first check so whether it is started or not. So our ng if is working or not. So the if demo is the component that we have designed, and yeah, it is compiling, right? Right. So let's access and see, and if demo is working fine. Okay. So that if demo is working fine. Okay. Let's go to the if demo component.ts. Fine. In this component ts, so I just need a basic component. Here I don't need all this. Yeah, just a basic component. Here I'm creating a product object. Product is an object, and in this product object, so I'm defining some name. So suppose I'm defining some property name. So name, and here I said suppose some Nike casuals. Okay, and here I defined some price and some price. Okay, and we have some photo. Photo is coming from assets, so it is shoe.jpg. That is the option here. Okay, now I need to display this in the UI. So let's go to the HTML. I need to display that in the UI. So let's create a div. So the class, so container fluid. Okay, in that I'm designing a simple div here. So I'm just creating a div, and in the div I'm creating here some card. So card, just we are displaying the detail here and displaying it. So let's create a simple div. Say card deck. We are using a card deck. Okay, and inside this we will have a simple class called card. Okay, card, and in this we have a div. So class as this is all bootstrap. Card header. So in the card header, a heading here, I want to display the product name. Then I can access product dot name. Okay, and I will put another, so that is card body. So card body, and in this I want to display a simple image. So I want to display some image. In the card header, suppose I want to put a paragraph, card header itself, and here I will display the price, the product dot price. We are displaying the product price. So technically in the card body, so we want to display some content. Okay. In the card body, I'm just creating a div. So class as form group, just appearance here. And here we have a button. So button functionality we will use later. So preview. Okay. Below this, we have another div and the class as form group. And in this, we have an image. So width 200 and height 200 of image. Image source, we use a property by the src. Source comes from product.photo. That contains the path for the picture actually. That is the path for the picture and it should get that and display it. Right. So that is the basic. So that is the option we have defined. Right. So now we can add so many things here. We can define so many things and configure. So let's create a simple design first, a basic design here. So technically you can see here in the output, it will display like this. It will display like this. We have just the name and the photo and the details here, right? This later you will learn about different pipes and all. Temporarily you can observe here. Suppose you want to display price in a currency form. You can put a pipe symbol and say currency. Later you are going to learn about them. Just temporarily currency and colon I put as INR. So that means the currency will be displayed in Indian rupee. That is currency for currency values. Later we will discuss about that formats. Correct. Temporarily I am just adding that effect there. This is a pipe which converts your number into a currency and it will display with a currency symbol. Later you are going to learn different things about those formats. Okay, here the key point is, so here we have to handle this. The key point is generally, so we are going to display here. Suppose observe here, this button preview, we have a preview button. And this preview button have to toggle the display. Preview button have to toggle the display. So that means, so actually the button that you have designed. So technically, see class as BTN and BTN primary. Okay, that is the button class we have defined. And this is the button here. Preview button is there. I want this button to hide or show this preview. Hide or show the preview actually. That means hiding and showing can be done with CSS. Actually, if you ask this to a JavaScript or jQuery people actually, they use show, hide like functions in jQuery. In JavaScript, they use document get element by ID, and they access that image. So that is pic, that is image ID, and they use style display. They use none. It will hide that image. If again they want to display, they have to access that image, and they need to set display as block or display as inline. I hope you know JavaScript. And if you know JavaScript, you know that this is how we manage. But actually, when we are displaying or hiding, then what is the problem is the element is still present in the page. but it is not shown on the screen. If an element is not visible on the screen, then no need to keep it in the page also. That means you are not using the element, but it is still in the page. So that is not great. Display actually does that. Display will keep the elements and it will keep the element in the page, but it will not show in the page. That means in the page it is present, but it is not removed from the page. It is not visible. It is not removed. It is still present. We don't want like that. If you are not showing, better remove it from the DOM. Better remove it from the DOM. If you are not showing, better remove it from the DOM. That is the point we need to follow. In that case, what we can do is here. So on the preview click, here we have two options to display. Suppose here we are adding two more properties. So is photo visible? By default, I kept it false, a Boolean value. Is photo visible? False. And here button text is another property. I will keep it as show as button text. Okay, see what we are doing here is I will use that button text here for button preview, and here I will use that dynamic button text. That means its word will be like show preview. It is like show preview. Fine. And this image should not be displayed, or simply this group should not be displayed. This complete div should be removed. So that means here in this div, I am adding a structural directive ngIf. It requires a Boolean condition or Boolean value. I am using a Boolean value is photo visible. Is photo visible is a property which initially contains false. If it initially contains false, you can see that image is not there. That image is not there. Now, when observe carefully, so in the inspect, when you are inspecting the elements, you can observe that you see, so this is the card body. In the card body, you can see here, this is the div. It contains a button, but image is not there. Image related logic is not there. That element is not there. And when I change this to true, is photo visible to true, then you can see that image is added there, and you can see that in the group another group is added. This group contains that image. That group contains that image. That means that element is newly added into your page. So we are not hiding, we are removing actually. So ngIf is a structural directive. ngIf is a structural directive. This structural directive can add any element or remove the element from the DOM. It can add the element or remove element from the DOM. It can add or remove element from the DOM. That is what actually a structural directive can do. It can add element, remove element, but we want to do that on button click. Initially, I keep it false. Okay. Now it is not displayed. It is hidden here. You can see it is hidden here. Okay. Now when I click show preview button, that means we have to write a button click. So on button click, we need to write a functionality. To write a functionality, generally what we are doing, so we are simply writing a method. So here we are writing a method. So that is toggle display. Toggle display is a method. Okay. What should happen on toggle display? This when this function should execute. this function should execute when user clicks the button. That means on the button click, events are written in parentheses. On button click, it should call toggle display. That function should execute. What that function have to do? It should change this photo visible. So, and the text also, button text also. That means what we are doing is, this dot is photo visible. By default, it is false. I need to make it toggle. If I need to make it toggle, then what we will do is, we will write like this. So a ternary operator I am using. This dot is photo visible is equal to false. If it is equal to false, then question mark, we will put it true. Otherwise, we will put it false. That's a ternary operator. That means, is photo visible? If it is false, then it is applied with true. If it is true, then it is applied with false. So that is the condition we are defining. Same for button text also. This dot button text. So here we will write a condition. This dot button text is equal to, if it is equal to show, button text is equal to show, then question mark, we will keep it hide. Otherwise, we will keep it show, like this, show. So that means we are changing the text also, Now observe carefully here. This button works as a toggle button. And technically, observe here. So in the body section, in this if demo, so in the container, expand this container, card deck, in that we have a card. In this card, you see the card header, card body. In the card body, only you have one group for button. And observe carefully, when I click show preview button, another div is added. Observe here, another div is added, right side. And in the div, the image is added. And automatically the button changes to hide preview. And excuse. So here I click on hide preview. So when I select this hide preview, then usually what happens is, on hide preview, it will remove that DOM. Remember, here you can see under the button that group is removed at all. So when I click show preview, it is adding an element. This div is added. And I click on hide preview, then that div is removed from the DOM. And it is updating only this portion of the page. It is not updating everything. It is updating only that portion of the page. Generally, many people, when they are learning Angular and other technologies like these technologies, they ask, sir, will you teach any AJAX here? First primary point is, already I told you in the features of Angular. Angular is asynchronous. By default, it is AJAX. Every interaction in Angular is AJAX. But generally, people who ask such question like, will you teach AJAX? Their intention is consuming APIs, services, and presenting the data from backend services. That is, they think AJAX. But every interaction can use AJAX. AJAX is nothing but asynchronously updating your page. AJAX is not only communicating with API data, fetching the data. Generally, people think who don't have a proper knowledge. So they ask like, will you teach AJAX in Angular? That's like a joke, right? So your question is not appropriate at all. That means first point, you don't know AJAX properly. So that means don't think that AJAX is only for interacting with data, pulling with APIs. AJAX is everywhere in application. That means if a page is asynchronously responding to you, adding new things into the page without refreshing the complete page, Here observe without reloading the page. You see page is not reloaded. Observe carefully when I click show preview. Without reloading the page, the new details are added to the page. That means internally, so Angular uses Ajax for several interactions. It's not like you separately use Ajax here. By default, it is asynchronous. And several interactions are used with asynchronous approach and defined with asynchronous approach usually. So defined with asynchronous approach technically. So a very important that here we have to understand. Right. Yeah. First, we need to understand that here technically, whenever you are dealing with Ajax and working with Ajax, so every interaction here is in Ajax. Managing everything is in Ajax only. So that is the reason when you are working here. So when you are working here, you need to know the Ajax interactions, asynchronous actions in various situations. You will see that. You will see interacting with APIs, services and all, but this is the basic approach. So here I showed you a simple form of if. I showed you a simple form of if. The very simple form of if is technically the simple form of if condition is the main purpose of this structural directive is to add the elements and to remove the elements. So you can add element and you can remove the element from the DOM. Add and remove element from the DOM. Right. So we will see several other interactions. That means we will see several other interactions. That means how we can use multiple conditions, how you can configure multiple conditions and use multiple conditions in this. So that means you currently have seen a simple if, adding and removing. If can be used with else conditions and blocks. So there are so many options to understand with this if. That means when condition true, one set of items are added into the page. If condition false, another set of items are added into the page. And not only here, ngIf is used in various occasions while working with validations and interactions. So much is there. So currently you have seen a simple if. That means how to use a structural directive, how we can add or remove the contents in the page and configure that. Right. Now, how multiple conditions are handled, how ngIf is used in various other situations, that also we will see. That we will see in our next session, right? So in the next session, we will go in depth and understand about this ngIf with more options. What are regularly asked in interviews related to this ngIf. And we can design some real world examples with this, right? So then we will see in the next session, right? Monday, we will discuss about that, right?